Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. So the entire glory of Team Rocket expansion in Japan has been released, so we know exactly what's going to be in our Destined Rivals expansion. So today we're going to look over all the cards that we haven't seen from the Rocket stuff and really start looking at deck building at this stage and how these archetypes are going to shape up now that we have the full list of the Pokemon, but also the trainer cards, importantly. So I'm going to zip down to the bottom first, go through the trainer cards, then jump back up to the Pokemon. Let's start off with Team Rocket's Intruder Robot. You choose one of your opponent's face-down prize cards and a random card from your opponent's hand. Your opponent reveals those cards, and you may have them switch their revealed cards. So there are these strange situations where attacking the opponent's hand can be powerful, especially after like a Xerosic's Machinations, for example. You can put them down to that low hand size, knowing then that you're going to hit a valuable piece. So this could be decent in a hand-locking style approach, where also you're going to throw things into their prizes as well. So you don't have full control over this, but it does sometimes scuff your opponent. So if there are going to be any Pidgeot control decks in the format, this is something you could consider. Could be a one-off, but when timed properly with supporter cards or abilities or whatnot, you can force your opponent out of that one or two card hand that they're sat on that's just good, and then you can suddenly intrude them and turn it into something different. I don't think this goes into like conventional decks, similar to like Grabber, where every now and then it popped up, but really you have to focus on your own consistency so much more than trying to randomly scuff the opponent in high roll situations. So I think you have to procure your deck to try and make this work, if at all, and even then I think just like a 1 or 2 count that you combine with other things in a combo based deck. Next up we have Team Rocket's Great Ball. This is an item card. Flip a coin. If heads, search your deck for an evolution Team Rocket's Pokemon and put it into your hand. If tails, it's a basic Team Rocket Pokemon, reveal it and put it into the hand. So it is capturing Aroma, but for only Rocket's Pokemon. Aroma was already quite a poor card. It only really went into Lugia because its entire combo relied on hitting Basics turn 1 and Evolutions turn 2, right? Or vice versa, because, you know, you can get your quest done by turn 2, and essentially every coin flip outcome was reasonable for Lugia because you needed those basics, sometimes multiple Lugia. Luminion could also backdoor you into the evolutions anyway via some of the supporter cards. So Aroma was a bad card in a really good deck, and I don't think the Rockets deck needs this, because as we'll see with the supporter cards, we really have great search for basics, and we already have good search for basics anyway in the game with Poffin and, you know, already Nestball and whatnot. So we are set for basic search. We shouldn't ever be flipping the coin hoping that Great Ball gets us a basic. And the issue is when it's only 50-50 of hitting that evolution, it's really poor. I think the main evolutions we're going to look at today, Arbok, Crobat, Spidops, of course. These are some of the big Rockets evolutions we would look to get, but you can't really justify it on a coin flip. It doesn't seem that powerful to me, when the downside of flipping for a basic is so bad because we already have such great search. So I think this is a poor card that won't even make it into the Rockets decks for the most part. We have Team Rocket's Venture Bomb. Flips a coin. If heads, put 2 counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If tails, put 2 counters on one of your Pokemon. Or sorry, your active, it should be. It's a strange card in that it's 2 counters, but it's just going to be anywhere, so I guess it's more flexible than plus power already. But everyone is just pointing to the idea that this is a damage synergy card that can go alongside Monkey Dory anyway. So, hey, I flip tails, well, I'm just going to monkey that back regardless. So if there are these archetypes, not like Gardevoir, which has an easy time of activating Monkey Dory, more like where a Dragapult has just put in 1 Dark Monkey Dory and there's an undamaged board, suddenly you can Venture Bomb, knowing the outcome is good both ways, right? Because either you damage yourself, then monkey it onto them, or you just get the heads flip and immediately put that where you want to, and then, hey presto, you're doing even more damage with Phantom Dive or whatever else it is, right? So I think this is a dangerous card, actually, in the game. It's an interesting mod. Probably does have to go alongside Monkey Dory to make it really worthwhile, although the tails flip isn't like that terrible, but the heads flip isn't high enough impact when you compare it to a Pokemon Catcher heads or a Crushing Hammer heads. So I think it's only in really specific decks where that's going to make a lot of sense, where that 2 damage tick in combination with your attacks or your abilities really start to make it dangerous at like taking out multiple threats in one go. And there aren't really that many decks. Like, I'm thinking of like an old Mew Genesect deck where you can lower your hand size, then reload, then lower your hand size, then reload. We don't really have those sorts of abilities in the game right now. We have Dracloak, we have Trade. We don't have these things that want to go low to go high again, you know, like the Bib Barrels or whatnot. So I don't think there's an easy shell for this card to like fit into. I don't think it fits into the current Rocket decks that I'm building, at least, because I don't think you have the space to fit these bombs. But yeah, interesting card. I think it's not going to see a huge amount of play, but there are those applications that are like obvious from the offset that sometimes damaging your own stuff is actually secretly good. Probably the best card in the set is Team Rocket's Receiver. It is still a pale in comparison to the old Holland Transceiver, which we're going back many years now to the old EX era. The Holland engine is one of my favorite engines of all time, for those who don't know. The upside of Holland's Transceiver, so it could only get Holland supporter cards, right? But it could get from the deck or the discard pile, so it let you cheat a lot of space. That's not what this card does, because it only searches your deck for a supporter with Rocket in its name, then puts it into your hand. So this isn't this incredible space cheat that the Holland engine could be, but it does give us a massive buff of consistency for hitting the crucial supporters when we want it. And you'll realize soon when we see all the Rocket supporters in its fruition that there's a lot of cards that are great when they're timed properly. There's Hand Disruption, there's Gust, there's early game basic search. All of these love having +4 outs to find them on any given turn in the game, just by having 4 Rocket's Receiver. So I think this is one of the big boasts of the Rocket archetype, is that the supporter cards look really, really powerful. I actually think the engine looks stronger than most of the Pokemon, to be honest with you. So it's going to be interesting whether or not this engine pole vaults the Rocket stuff altogether, because really, you won't be playing, I think, any of these Rocket supporters outside of a Rocket's Receiver full-on Rockets package. There could be a situation where you just play some of, like, the Protons and nothing else, or some of the Petrels and something else, but for the most part, you're playing all 5 of these, or at least 4 of the 5, in a deck together, and hoping that the quad receiver stitches it all into one place. I'm actually going to start with the Team Rocket's Proton as the supporter of the 5, because this can be used even when you go first. So that's a big deal. Suddenly, all the Rockets decks want to go first in the game, rather than having to battle it out with all these other setup decks that want to go second so that they can Arven and get TMEvo off, or just get their Buddy Poffins and have those additional outs to play the game. This deck gets to have a good amount of outs to get that turn 1 Proton, because you can play 4 copies of this and 4 copies of the Receiver, right? And if you really want to, you can play Secret Box as well. So that's 9 starting outs to have this card, and suddenly you can search your deck for 3 basic Team Rockets Pokemon and put them directly into your hand. That's really, really powerful. That can immediately like flood your bench if you want to start evolving up some of these guys. And of course, we know the Rockets Mewtwo needs to have 4 Rockets Pokemon in play to be even able to attack. So the Proton is massive here. And I do think there are going to be situations where we forego Poffin altogether. We have a light count of Nest Ball possibly, but just 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Proton, 4 Receiver, and say that I'm hitting this turn 1, my odds are good enough to get it off. And when I do get this going first, it's just absolutely phenomenal. Obviously, you can do it going second as well, and still is a really good turn 1 supporter play. But the fact that you can weave in a supporter for free when every other deck can't, and then suddenly you're drawing cards or gusting on 2 or this, that, and the other, that's one of the big boasts of the Rockets deck. You know, not many decks can gust on 2, just the way the format is played, unless it's like Prime Catcher off a Noctowl, something like that. So that might be one of the main differentiators of the Rockets archetype, is that you can go in some, some hands, if they're good enough, you can go turn 1 Proton, turn 2 Giovanni, which is great. Let's talk about Giovanni, actually. This is going to be a staple in the Rockets decks. You switch your active Rockets Pokemon with one of your benched Rockets, and then you switch one of your opponent's benched Pokemon with their active. So it is the return of Guzma, where we get a free switching effect, which is really good because, again, then it does become a space cheat in your deck. Means you have to play fewer switching cards generally, because your Gus supporter, what would be your boss's orders slots, are now this Giovanni, which provides switching for you, which can get you around, status conditions or all this other annoying stuff, whilst having Gust at the same time. We know Guzma is a stronger effect than boss's orders. It's just more applicable. There are more situations where this is really handy for you. Yeah, this is just another big deal for the Rocket stuff. They have a superior version of Boss, which is just terrifying to say, because Boss is in every deck in, even like 2 counts or higher in some decks as well. So yeah, this is going to be a staple. I think you can float around the 2 or 3 count for most of the Rocket builds I've made, because this is Boss that then has a +4 outs. So the effect is stronger and it's more findable on the turn you need it. And that's one of the big headaches of Boss's orders, that you're using your abilities, using your draw power, using Poker Gears, digging, hoping to find Boss's orders on a crucial turn to deal with a threat or just to end your game on a certain prize race. And having those, again, inbuilt additional outs in the end game is massive here. So this is a huge deal. A searchable Boss's orders via an item card, guaranteed, that then has a bonus on Boss. Like, I can't understate how insane that effect is. Let's look at Team Rocket's Petrel. Now, this one doesn't have to be in a random receiver deck. Oh, sorry, not a random receiver, a Rockets receiver deck. but it certainly could be, even if it is in lower counts. It's simply search your deck for a trainer card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. This isn't that strong of an effect. We know that Arven can already do this for item cards and tool cards, so you get 2 in 1. The Petrol, of course, can be any trainer card, so you can also get a Stadium or you can get anything else, like a supporter for the following turn. Not that you probably would, because you would just go for a receiver most of the time to stay flexible. But the fact that this is searchable from a receiver, having just 1 copy of Petrol in your deck then means that if there's ever that hand where you need a missing piece, then you can go receive a Petrol, find that missing piece, whether it's an E-switch, whether it's a physical switch, whether it's that last ball search card you need to get like a Spidops down, something like that, Having this to fill the gaps in your supporter lineup is really nice. So, and also, of course, A-specs are oftentimes item cards, or even then, stadium cards and tools. Petrol can find all of those. So having this makes all of your A-specs, well, the majority of A-specs much more searchable as and when you need them, which is, again, a big deal. So I definitely foresee Petrol being a 1 or 2 maximum count in some of the Rockets decks. Just for access to that A-spec. I've personally been trying it with Secret Box, so oftentimes I will go turn 1 Proton, turn 2 Receiver Petrol, get Box, and then I'm getting like a Stadium card, a Tool card, a Receiver for next turn, and a Supporter in hand, something like that, or a Supporter in hand and an immediate Ball Search card, So this can do all sorts for you, and I think even just in low counts, that's going to be a big deal. I think the Team Rockets Archer's often going to be like a 2 count in the Rockets deck, where it can only be played if a Team Rockets Pokemon were knocked out on your opponent's last turn. This is really big text, actually, because every build of the Rockets, well, almost every Rockets deck I've built, I think not all of them, actually, but the majority of ones, certainly the Mewtwo ones, I've been very hesitant to put any non-Rockets Pokemon in my deck, because if you go down a full Rocket supporter package in your deck, as in you cut Iono altogether and just have Archer in here, it means that any non-Rockets Pokemon on your bench that is then gusted and KO'd, like say for example Pheasantipity EX, if that was in your Rockets deck and then was KO'd during a turn, you can't hand disrupt your opponent's back because it has to be a Team Rockets Pokemon that was knocked out, right? So this is one of the things that really makes the Rocket deck have to contain itself to just Rocket stuff. That's one of the main downsides here, is that both of the next 2 supporters we're going to look at, the Archer and the Ariana, these really need to only care about Rockets Pokemon being on your board the entire time. So even a card as good as Mew EX or Pheasantipity EX or, Teal Mask Ogopon, all these cards that have gone in all sorts of archetypes in the past just because, hey, they're good enough, you can't really do that now. If you want to play the full-on Rockets package. And I do think that's something we have to weigh up, whether or not these Rockets cards can afford to play this full Rockets package, or we just stick to the support cards that we know and then allow ourselves to have a few more strong abilities in the deck. That's something that we are going to have to toss up right now to see what's best. But if you are playing a full-on Rocket engine, this is ridiculous because the hand disruption is when you've suffered a KO, your opponent goes straight down to 3 cards and you get 5. That's a pretty decent deal. 5 cards isn't a huge amount for you, but 3 cards is really limited for them. So this deck gets to play essentially multiple unfair stamps in its list, whilst not committing its A-spec, right? So that's a pretty big deal. Obviously, this is on a supporter card, and there's not much draw in the Rockets deck to keep you topped up after this effect, so you're really hoping that those 5 cards help you out a lot. But this is very powerful at that hand disruption, and I think that's one of the big boasts of the Rocket decks generally, is that you can immediately punish your opponent from taking an aggressive prize or 2 prize cards. If they do that, they have to expect that they are going straight down to 3 cards and are working off that, for the next turn and possibly even the following turn after that. So couple Archer in the deck. You only need a couple because you have the receivers. That's going to be one of the big reasons to play the Rockets deck, honestly. This is a great supporter. Then we also have the Ariana. This draws until you have 5 in hand, but if all of your Pokemon in play are Rockets Pokemon, so again, same as Archer, even more in black and white terms here, where you get to draw until you have 8 rather than 5. So that again incentivizes us. If we want to play this receiver engine, we need to play all Rockets Pokemon. It's an all or nothing deal if you want to play these 2 supporters. I think if you just want to play like receiver Proton Giovanni, even then, because you need to switch a Rocketsmon with another Rocketsmon. So these, well, the Petrol is universal, the Proton is a Rockets deck, but then like the Giovanni, Ariana, and Archer, those are being compared to the Iono research boss's orders. That's the trade-off, and I think in a lot of situations, Archer, Giovanni, Ariana might actually be stronger. Drawing until you have 8 is a pretty substantial amount of cards, and it does allow us to play in such a way where we're lowering our hand size. Like I was saying with that Venture Bomb, where there aren't many engine Pokemon that want us to go down to go back up. These are the sort of cards. Having more insta-playables in your Rockets deck is a big deal so that you can have Ariana topping you up for, 6 cards, 5 cards, that amount of draw. Because comparing it to a research, if you don't build your deck in that sort of way, you're going to be drawing less than research, and you really don't want to be in that position. We want to play a Rockets build that can constantly lower its hand size with Ultra Balls, with Vessels, insta-playable item cards, just so that we are constantly flooding our hand down low, like littering everything out the hand and then topping way back up. To make the most out of this. So, really interesting way to build the Rockets deck. I've been experimenting with it a lot already, but 8 cards is a decent chunk, certainly. And I think there's a stadium card that actually pushes all of these supporters over the top, is the Team Rockets Factory. I think this card is really good. Once during either player's turn, when that player plays a supporter with Team Rocket in its name from their hand, they may draw 2 cards. So, going from 8 cards to 10, going from 5 cards to 7, getting a +2 draw on any of these effects is insane. Again, we've buffed Boss's Orders to somehow be draw power at the same time. This Team Rocket's Factory, it's a strange card in that it's like the rich get richer, almost. You start with that opening hand, you throw the factory down, then you start playing your supporter card. Hey, you're getting bonus cards as you go. That's such a great deal. But when your opponent bounces stadium, hand disrupts you, you can use your Archer or your Ariana, and then you draw into the stadium, and it's a dead draw. So it's not quite as good as, say, like old Scorched Earth or anything like that, where you can choose when to draw. Because it's tied to the supporter, it's a little bit weaker. But the fact that it's a +2 cards is crazy. Like, think about when we were Radiant Greninjaing in basically every deck just for that +2 cards all the time. We're doing the same thing here. So, and of course, this deck is all about using a supporter every turn. You're going to play high counts of a lot of these supporters, certainly for Ariana, like 2 Archer, 3 to 4 Proton, probably 1 Petrol, and like 2 to 3 Giovanni, plus the 4 Receiver. You have like a third of your deck committed to supporter stuff if you include the factories. So I think very much so the Rockets decks will be playing a high count of the factory, not just 1 or 2, unless you're playing Secret Box, which you could be doing, because this is a big bonus. And the most important thing about the factory is you do it before your supporter card to get maximum value. And then these supporters are going way over the top. Like I was saying already, they're like in line with Boss. I think Giovanni's already better than Boss. But like Ariana and Archer are kind of in line with Iono and Research. There are times when these are worse, actually. But then, whenever you have a factory down, they are all universally, like, unquestionably better supporter cards. So, the factory is a very powerful stadium card. I think it's going to be like a 2/3 of in the Rockets decks, just to have that extra burst of draw. And like I was saying, when you can't put other Pokemon into play, like you can't have a random Zoroark EX draw new cards, you can't have a Dunsparce in there, you can't have the Mew EX, the Pheasantipity, those sorts of things, because of how the supporter cards are worded. So now having it in the form of a stadium card is really handy. So this is going to be a really big deal. There's also the Team Rockets Watchtower. Now, this is a Team Rockets card, but it doesn't matter. This is like a universally good disruption card, where both players' colorless Pokemon have no abilities. And as we know, there are some crazy powerful colorless abilities in the game right now. We have Quick Search, we have Dunsparce, we have Noctowl, Fan Rotom as well, if you just happen to high roll this turn 1 before they can get the Fan Call out. You're stopping the Ditto, I suppose, as well. You are stopping Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, and you also stop Slacking EX, which is kind of cool. So the Slacking deck might be able to attack into all sorts of things now, which is kind of interesting, I suppose. But yes, this is a big deal, and I think similar to how we have seen Path of the Peak style decks, there could easily be archetypes, for example, like Duraludon, which has previously used the jamming towers just to be disruptive. Now I could see them easily reverting to the Watchtowers and start disrupting the Raging Bolts that use Noctowl, the Terror Boxes, the Terrapagos builds. I think hitting the Noctowl engine really hits them hard, to be honest with you, because unless they already have Stadium in hand, they are just toast, because they play a really unorthodox number of supporter cards and ball search cards and whatnot, purely because Noctowl can fix it all for them. And they also go skimpy on Area Zero. Some of the builds play like 2 stadiums or 3 stadiums, so sometimes you just catch them on a hand. Obviously, you can go Watchtower Archer as a combo. That's just going to be devastating for Noctowl decks. And again, like Pidgeot's also hit by this, of course. So yeah, I think this is a big change to the format, to be honest with you. This is a really big landscape shift. And decks that don't rely on a stadium card right now could easily find their way to have high counts of the Watchtower, and I also think anyone using Secret Box can play 1 Watchtower and suddenly they're winning a bunch of matchups. So I think it's actually low-key a buff to Secret Box, which is already like a really good card, right? But similar to how we've seen like Temple of Sinnoh back in the day being the one-of stadium that all sorts of decks played just to randomly grief one or two matchups, I think the Watchtower will very much do that, and it really puts the Noctowl engine in check. I still believe the Noctowl engine is the strongest in the game that we have right now. So putting that in check is reasonable, and I think the Watchtower is a very powerful card. Not necessarily a boast that the Rocket deck will have, even though it's like a Rocket's card. I think they're much more tied to the factory. I think all sorts of decks are going to be picking this up and using it a bunch. Next up, we have Team Rocket's Energy. This is just a busted energy card. As long as it's attached to a Rocket's Pokemon, it provides 2 in any combination of Psychic and Dark. We'll look at some of the attackers in a moment, but that's one of the big things about the Rocket's deck is that a lot of their attackers really need this Rocket's Energy to make their attack costs efficient. So this is a massive energy. It's going to be like a natural 4-of in everything Rocket. No questions asked, no downside. Yeah, just a busted card, to be honest with you. Let's have a look at some of the other Pokemon then. There is a Rotom that's grass type, so you always have to think about it, because this is covering Charizard, I think it's Mamoswine, I think it's like Marnie's Grimmsnarl, which is actually a pretty good card, the more I'm looking at it. Even the Garchomp. So having grass weakness is a big deal still. Gadget Show can do 30x the amount of tools attached to all your Pokemon, so maybe it's a way to KO stuff. Obviously, double colors isn't the same as it used to be, but we know there's Crispin in format, so always got to keep an eye on those. Then we have the Tarantula and Spidops. I think Jack has already talked about some of these Rockets cards, but I'm still going to go over it because we're at the building stage now, so we have a much better picture of like how these are being applied to the game. It does have 50 hit points. That does look terrible, but as we'll see in a moment, there's an Articuno that can protect this guy from damage counter placement from Dragapult, which is a big deal. It's still obviously concerned about Dusclops, so that's something to bear in mind. But it does have a 1 grass for 30 attack, so this can get around Budgie really easily, and that's another big deal for the Rockets deck. Being able to like shrug through it because its main basic search is via a supporter, and if you just start a Tarantula, you're taking a KO on the Budgie straight away and like carrying on with your day. I think that's a big deal. Spidops, again, it's a grass type, so Rocket Rush is a really important attack. Mewtwo is weak to Dark, so having a grass Pokemon in your deck then means you can attack back into Charizard or into Zoroark, these sorts of Pokemon, and uptrade back into them as a 1-prize Pokemon. Obviously, its ability is a fantastic engine. It's any basic energy card, just like old Naganadel. So, yeah, very powerful ability. We've seen this be strong in all sorts of forms in the past. I still feel like it's probably best with Mewtwo. I don't know if it's best, like, there's been people talking about Quagnag being restored with this and Armarouge. I think Armarouge can already use Ethan's Ho-Oh EX as a basic, which just seems better. But obviously this is more like universal energy acceleration to bear in mind. I do think you have to play some amount of grass in the Rockets deck. My initial build was playing bug catching sets. I know that's a like kind of copium bad card. And that makes you play all grass energy, but it very much could be the case where we have some grass so you can attack with this, some psychic so you can E-switch off of this onto Mewtwo when need be as well. So just bear that in mind. Arbeliever is absolutely terrible. The Oil Machine Gun does 6x20, and you can like throw the 20s how you like it. Think of it like a well, it's called machine gun. Yeah, it's a great way to put it actually. But it's low damage output overall. Even though you're being so specific with your counter placement, and there are synergies that you have here, I don't think it's like good enough. And its second attack is also pretty terrible. Rocket's Moltres EX has Flame Barrier for fire, colorless, does 110, and during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 50 less damage from attacks. Don't think that's a powerful enough build around. An Evil Burn for fire, 3 colorless, discard a Team Rocket's energy from this Pokemon. If you do, discard your opponent's active Pokemon and all cards attached to it. Disruptive, certainly. It's still hard to power this up. Like, you have to do so much work. Getting it off in a turn is really tough because you need the Rocket's energy to be your manual attachment, so even with like counter gain or something, you need to somehow move a fire energy somewhere else. Yeah, this isn't like a splashable card by any means. They made sure of that with the Rocket's energy requirement going on. Obviously the effect is quite powerful, but I don't really see how that's like shaping up into one deck. Really big note, actually, is that the Blaziken line finally gets a 70 hit point Torchic. We've been working with a 60 hit pointer. Now we get a 70, which is actually a big deal. I think Blaziken gets a lot better next set. Its ability is really good, actually. And we also get this powerful single prize option with the Inferno legs for fire, colorless. It does 120. You discard 2 from this, and it does 120 to one of your opponent's bench. That's really good when Blaziken EX already works around Monkey Dory quite nicely because you can accelerate Dark Energies to the Monkey Dories via your EX. I think setting up lots of things for bench damage and then having this as a 1-prize option, whether or not you're using reversal energy in the deck or just trying to power it up with a bunch of your EX, that's a bit of a dreamer scenario where you have multiple EX powered up. but that's a big payoff, actually. Realistically, I think the Torchic is the biggest bonus for the Blaziken deck, which is already making it much more reasonable and like less meme. But having a Blaziken is actually a pretty powerful card. I'm low-key invested in Blaziken next set. I think it goes from like meme tier with cool intrigue to like actually a very powerful stage 2 in the next expansion, to be honest with you. This is the Articuno that I alluded to when talking about the Tarantula. The Resistance Veil prevents all effects of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks done to your basic Team Rocket's Pokemon in play. Damage is not an effect, so this isn't Manaphy. This is just going to be Jirachi, essentially, but protecting all of your Rocket's basics. So that's a pretty handy deal. Those little 50 hit pointers were a concern of mine when the cards were first revealed, the little spider guys down here, but now we have an Articuno that can protect us from it. It does also have the Dark Frost attack, 60 and 60 more if it has a Team Rocket energy attached to it. I don't think we're going to be attacking with this anytime soon, but this is probably going to make it into basically every Rockets deck as like a one-off, to be honest with you. Then we have the Gorobis Huntail Clamperl thing. I'm going to be honest, any time I see a basic with 60 hit points or less, I think it's like a complete meme deck, because we know that Gardevoir, Dragapult, and basically anything that can use Monkey Dory will just like mug you off at some point in the game. But the gimmick here is that Huntail has the ability Diver Catch. Whenever one of your water Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you may put all basic water energy, attach that Pokemon into your hand instead of the discard, and then you can just send in big Gorobis. So the idea is to just like throw a bunch of energy towards this Gorobis, because Crescendo Wave for 1 water does 30x the amount of water attached to this Pokemon. But before you do the damage, you can attach any number of basic energy from your hand to this Pokemon. So get a bunch of those energies into hand, and then crescendo them all onto a Gorobis, do decent damage output probably, and hope that you have a Huntail on the bench and that they knock out your Gorobis by damage from an attack. Unfortunately, there are so many ways to get around this, and your game plan completely falls apart. You know, they can KO the Huntail and the Gorobis on the same turn, for example, and then you don't get to dive them back. You can KO the Gorobis in all sorts of ways outside of damaging it. So yeah, really, really poor meme deck. And again, you always have to be skeptical. When you ever see something with 60 hit points or less, you have to just think, probably not going to be good enough, to be honest with you. We do have Titan EX. Now, this is a really interesting card, actually. It's a 300 hit point stage 1. We know that Archaladon is already just good from that baseline alone, that's a difficult to hit number, and you can make a name for yourself just from that alone. But it also has the Snow Cover ability. Whenever your opponent plays an item or supporter card from their hand, prevents all effects of that card done to this Pokemon. Mind-blowing ability. Really, really one of the strongest abilities we could ever see in the game. This was on a Primal Groudon back in the day from its alpha traits, or I can't remember what its trait was called anyway. But yeah, this is insane, actually, as an ability that you just waggle the finger and say, no, you can't interact with this Titan. I bring it into the active when I want to, when it's ready, and I'm going to be swinging with it. That's kind of the idea. It does have an expensive attack cost, Crush Press for 3 water, 1 colorless. You do 140 and you discard a Stadium in play if you do 140 more damage. 280, that's the big thumbs up. That's a great number that we need to be hitting. Obviously, it's not quite the same as when there was all these V-Stars in the game, but there are still a number of basic EX and Stage 1 EXs that you're covering with this. And as we know, that 280 is easy to like black belt up to 320 or max belt up to 330. We can get to those numbers if we have to with Titan, which is a really big deal. So I think they could easily be similar to how we saw old Groudon back in the day. We don't quite have an ability as good as Wobbuffet, but we could have annoying basics that we can throw at the opponent, whether it's Mimikyus or whatever else, buy ourselves as much time as possible. While we slow attach to Titan, we can also play Monkey Dory Dark Energy as well if we want to, and have Crispin in there, so the Crispin could be the 1 colorless, and then you still have Water Energy that you're manually slow attaching. Of course, there is Baxcalibur in format, but I don't think you're going to play Baxcalibur Titan, probably. But I do think you can slowly get this Titan going, and at some point, tank with Titan, you know, you can put a tool on it and it's not going to be able to be removed, I don't think, because you prevent all effects of that card done to this guy. I need to make sure of that, actually. But I'm sure you can buff this guy up, make him difficult to KO, and at that point, or you can even like buff padding him as well. Is it buff padding? No, the heavy baton, that's what I mean. And then your second Titan comes in and tries to like close the game from there. So this is going to have a really unorthodox prize race, essentially, thanks to its ability, where you can like sacrifice prizes for your opponents. You can give them 3 single prize Pokemon, then your first Titan goes down, and then the second one is going to be the thing that try and closes you the game. whether you're like trying to heal it up or bulk it up or whatever else. And again, that damage threshold is pretty powerful. Your opponent can try and interact with your Titan with, you know, outside of supporters and item cards. They can still try and do bench damage and this, that, and the other. So it's by no means flawless, but I do think there will be a build round for this card. Whether it's having disruptive abilities while you're slow building, or whether it's going to be walling abilities, those sorts of things, or even just setup abilities. You know, it could just be like Budju and Cleffer and stuff like that while you attach to other things. Who knows? But yeah, so Titan, I think, has a lot of potential. I'm still yet to build this well, but yeah, it screams potential just because we know the throwback from back in the day when Groudon had way worse stats comparatively to this card and was good enough. So there is a Rocket Zapdos. It can move energy from itself or from your opponent's active, but that's not a huge deal. Small bit of disruption there. There is a Rocket's Ampharos line, the Darkest Impulse. Whenever your opponent plays a Pokemon from their hand to evolve during their turn, put 4 counts on the Pokemon. I mean, I think it's terrible, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a strong enough ability to make it work, even with Devo in format, even with like Tyranitar and Bats that we'll look at in a moment. I still think you're not committing space to this line to make it work, but it's a cute line nonetheless. This is a great Mareep, by the way. There's a Hypno that does random coin flip bench damage, which you would hate to lose to, but I think it's pretty poor. Then we have Rocket's Mewtwo. This is still a big topic of conversation. Right now, I don't think it's that good. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think a like 4 Mewtwo deck is going to work. I think it's more than likely that you play like 2 Rocket's Mewtwo in a deck that plays more single prize toolboxy mons and hope that it comes together that way, because yeah, from what I've tested with Mewtwo, it's been underwhelming so far. Having this multi-prize Pokemon, even with that size, the fact that that Power Saver ability is a deal means that you can't miss your Proton on turn 1 or turn 2, and you need to have found all your other stuff. You're not allowed to miss your Rocket's Energy, which is only a 4 of, and you have nowhere to search it, unless you play like Chorus's Tenacity, which sounds terrible. And Deletion Sphere. 160 is a good baseline, but it's not KOing anything, so you also need to get multiple Spidops going turn 2. You need so much to have gone right turn 2 to actually get a turn 2 Deletion Sphere. But like comparing it to the other aggro basics, now I know this isn't quite an aggro deck because you have the Rocket's Receiver Archer plays. You can be much more defensive with this deck than like Bolt ever could, but at your core, you're still an easy to KO 2-prize basic. I say easy to KO. You're still a 2-prizer that is just trying to swing into the active for high damage outputs, but it's a lot more work than other decks, and it's lower damage output than the other decks. It's capped at 280, which is not a great cap either. I know I was just saying Sir Titan can do it, but I feel like a deck like that has more license to play the black belts and whatnot, whereas this deck needs to keep finding its next Rocket Energies, keep finding its next attachment, keep finding its like Bravery Charm, this, that, and the other, and keep utilizing the main supporter every turn. So yeah, I think it's tough out there for Rocket's Mewtwo. I've been underwhelmed with it in my dummy testing so far. That could be just how I've built it. I've also seen the official channel in Japan has also done like an initial build, and it again didn't look all that impressive to me. I do think it will counter Dragapult pretty hard, but I don't think this is going to be like the universal Bediff. That's just my initial take on the Rocket stuff so far. Rocket Swab is interesting. Rocket Mirror moves all counters from one of your benched Team Rockets to your opponent's active. I think the main synergy here is that your Rocket Mewtwo can easily get tank hits with Bravery Charm and stuff like that. And it's just one Giovanni plus Rocket Energy away from mirroring that back and really putting your opponent in a bad position if they've put a huge chunk into the Mewtwo. Even if they've only put like an average chunk, the fact that you're healing the Mewtwo at the same time is pretty good. So I think Wob could be a one-of in the deck. The only thing to bear in mind is that you either need to have it on the bench already, or you need to have that really specific hand of Boss Energy Wob, you know? So I say Boss, I mean Guzma Energy Wob. So yeah, bear that in mind. Chingling can discard cards at random from your opponent's hand, not that good. The Rocket's Mimikyu, this is a really, really powerful card, actually. It does have that low 60 hit points, but again, if you really want to, you can play Rocket's Articuno. But similar to how we've seen a lot of decks go for, well, not a lot of decks, but certainly Gardevoir has made a name for itself by using Mew EX with Lily's Clefairy to counter Dragapult. Rocket's Mimikyu is a single prize, single energy attachment counter to Dragapult, in that you can KO a Pult whilst having that 6 damage counter placement from a single prize Pokemon with that Lily's Clefairy in the back. That's a big deal. And this is one attachment, right? Because one Rocket's Energy can get you the Gem Mimicry. So that's huge. Also, interestingly enough, this might be the best answer to Cornerstone Ogerpon that the Mewtwo deck actually has, because the Mewtwo deck is all abilities. It's this card, it's the Spidops, it's the Articuno. None of those things can hit it. So having Mimikyu in the Mewtwo deck is really important, so you can get around Cornerstone Ogerpon actually with the Demolish. So do bear that in mind. I think the Mimikyu is no doubt going to be in the Mewtwo deck, but I think it could be in all sorts of other decks, actually. I think it's just that powerful of a card. If we have that little bit of, even Crispin Acceleration, right, gets you there, similar to, Terrabox could have this as a one-of in the deck. It has a natural free retreat as well. This card is crazy, crazy strong. Natural Pivot is huge as well, actually, so do bear that in mind. We do have a Stage 2 Rocket's Orbeetle with the Rocket Brain. As often as you like during a turn, you can move one damage counter from one of your Team Rocket's Pokemon to another of your Pokemon. Don't think it's that powerful. Yes, you can try and keep one thing tanky and healthy, but I don't think that's that likely to be powerful, because the main thing we have is Mewtwo, and it has a common dark weakness, so I think that's a small concern, and then Psychic isn't really worth building around, even with Rocket's Energy in the mix. There's an interesting Annihilate with the Vessel of Rage ability. If this Pokemon has 2 or more counters on it, attacks used by this Pokemon do 120 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, so we could be using the bombs, coin flip, try and hit our own Annihilate. Suddenly Impact Blow could be 2 for 280. Again, more of a gimmick on a Stage 2. There is a Rocket's Tyranitar. Do bear in mind that the Rocket's Pupitar does have Explosive Awakening. You can search your deck for a card that evolves from this and put it onto this Pokemon to evolve. That's relevant because you could, in theory, Salvatore into Pupitar, then Awakening, and then go straight into a Rocket's T-Tar. And this is a pretty powerful ability. Sandstream, as long as this Pokemon is in your active spot, put 2 counters on each of your opponent's basic Pokemon during Pokemon Checkup. Yeah, actually can be quite devastating to slow down or really pressurize opponents to evolve a bunch of things quickly. And we've seen this ability powerful in the past, so do bear this one in mind. It has the Breakthrough Tackle as well for 1 fighting, 3 colors, does 180 and discount energy from your opponent's active. Quite the expensive attack still, even with Reverse Limb format, it still requires that little bit more. So it's not easy to get going. But that ability alone might make it good enough to try and build around, where we're just shoving this guy between turns and hoping to ping stuff down alongside the damage we've already done. We've seen things like Frostlass do so much between turns, and probably Frostlass is still going to be better than this card, but this is all basics, so it does cover different things. Artwork appreciation of the nose right here. Regirock is terrible. This is a really interesting card, the Rocket's Arbok. First of all, bear in mind the Ekans has 70 hit points, which is good, and the Rocket's Arbok 130 hit points, Stage 1. The Intimidating Glare. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent can't play any Pokemon cards with abilities from their hand, excluding Rocket's Pokemon. Most of the good cards in the game have abilities. So denying your opponent from putting these down is absolutely insane. Of course, Nest Ball is from the deck. Of course, TM Evolution is from the deck as well. So there are ways around this Arbok, but typically you're denying a lot of ways. You're denying Ultra Ball Search from Evolution and from just getting basics with abilities down. You're stopping, if they turn 1 Fan Call, you're stopping them just playing Noctowl from hand, that sort of thing. There are lots of effects that have to come from the hand that you're denying from this Arbok. So straight away, stuff like Archaludon, terrified of this, all sorts of abilities that are the build around of decks are in shambles because of this card. So yes, the means around it are boss's orders, and they can still play stuff. But as we know, this is really strong. This is Trevenant levels of power, I think, to be honest with you, with how much reliance we have on abilities. A Gardevoir player can't go into Guardy. That's pretty bad, So I think this is going to be this annoying throw it into the active style Pokemon. How do we get it in and out of the active is certainly a question, because it does have that 2 retreat cost. So is it going to be alongside the new Crobats and we use Petrarunts? Possibly. Are we going to use it alongside Jet Energies and some sort of attacker that can hit and run? Possibly as well. Or are we just going to have that really high count of Switch or Surfer in our deck to try and hit and run with this? Is it a new card for a Feraligatr deck? These are all things we have to bear in mind, but that ability alone is definitely worth building around. Really powerful stuff. The Spinning Tail also does 30 to each of your opponent's Pokemon for 3 Dark Energy. Even with the Rocket's Energy, I don't think you're attacking with this card more than likely, but its ability is really strong. And I do think its probable main partner is going to be Crobat. Might be wrong on that. There might be some better hit and run guys. Or there could be some ways just to, like, maybe again, we just play like a free retreat Darkmon, like a Morpeko, and then retreat out of that with Pecharunt. Maybe there's some sort of deck that can reverse engineer a way to make it work. But yeah, really powerful cards. The Nidos are all terrible. The Crobat line is really interesting, though. Rocket Zubat's just a little 50 hit pointer, but the Rocket's Golbat is an 80 hit point stage 1 with the Sneaky Bites. Once during your turn, when you evolve, you can put 2 counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, just like old Sneaky Bites from Phantom Forces, which was one of my favorite cards in that era for sure. There are still a lot of things, you know, this 2 counters still does go a long way, to be honest with you. It sets up all sorts for like Monkey Dory, it sets up, you know, we can get so creative with our damage counter placement these days. A couple Golbats and you're KOing some of the basic stuff, you know, like the Budews and whatnot. Yeah, it can combine with all sorts of other things and just themselves. You know, if you can just find enough bats early, you can start pinging down basics before they're able to evolve, and that's powerful. It does have the Confuse Ray for 1 dark. You do 30 and Confuse. Sure, it's okay. But the Rocket's Crobat also has an ability that places counters. This time it's Bite Around, where when you evolve, you put 2 counters on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. So 4 counters total, but split into 2. Again, more powerful stuff. You can be slow building these bats and setting up damage across the board. Well, why I think it's pretty good with Arbok, 2 reasons. Because if they can't play certain Pokemon down, and specifically if they can't evolve their stuff, suddenly, as they're being shut down, you're evolving up and starting to ping them aggressively. That can start getting really dangerous really quickly. And it also has the lethal return attack, which works quite nicely with this ability, actually. You do 120 and put this Pokemon into your hand, discarding all cards attached. That discard is really unfortunate, because otherwise this would work really, really well with Rocket's Energy. But we do still have Janine's Secret Technique, I suppose, if we want to have this with Dark Energy. And again, like I said, this is a Dark attacking Mon. Monkey Dory uses Dark Energy, so having pings plus Monkey Dory damage, always powerful. And I think you might need to have something supplementing this attack if you really want to build around it. But what's powerful about this, of course, it has Lightning Weakness, which isn't that common right now. I know there is a bit of murmurings of Miraidon making a small resurgence in Japan with like Iron Hands and Pikachu and whatnot. But that weakness isn't common. If we can buff up the Crobats, we can sponge hits, and then just jump back into the hand, we can undo turns from our opponents. So there will be low damage output matchups where Crobat is just filth, because you can send him up, sponge hit, then you're returning. And even if you're doing small amounts of damage, you're then topping it up with the abilities, and then sending in more Crobats that they can't KO, and again, you can undo that damage even more so with Turo or just with your attack itself. So yeah, I think the bats probably alongside Arbok is going to be a powerful combination. Also, it could be similar. I've built it similarly to Feraligatr, where you have Monkey Dory, annoying walling Pokemon, and you're like slow building around Budew and getting towards a point of it being very powerful. And we know that the Sneaky Bites and the Bite Around will work so nicely with Monkey Dory if you're Budew locking them, or if you're Arbok locking. That could be really dangerous. So yeah, something to bear in mind, certainly. Rocket's Muck, not great. It does more damage for status conditions. The Coughing can get more Coughings out when it's KO'd. So the Rocket's Wheezing is actually a pretty cool card. The Exploding Mob does 40x the amount of Pokemon in play with Coughing or Wheezing in its name. You may think that's not very impressive, but you are allowed to play 4 Coughing and 4 Rocket's Coughing in your deck. In theory, we can be hitting 320 for 1 attachment. It's a lot of upkeep, and unfortunately the only Coughings that we have in format I think only have 60 hit points. So that's a bit of a concern, but yeah, we could play a real big Exploding Mob Area Zero style deck. Almost certainly a meme, but someone will make a video on it, no doubt. Rocket Sneasel, kind of a cool card. Hit the wound, does 20 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon for each counter already on that Pokemon. So this is very similar to the old Cataday card, what was it? The Esper, that was in some of the Malamar decks. And I think the idea is it's trying to synergize with Crobat, where you're doing all these bites around the board, and suddenly you can be doing higher damage output with a single prize Pokemon for just 1 Rocket's Energy. Kind of a cool throwback, but again, not that powerful. I don't think it even makes it into the bats list, just because of how tight bench space will be, and that Monkey Dory is probably just better served, to be honest with you. Rest of the stuff not all that powerful. Persian we know is a meme, Raticate's a meme. The Porygon Z, kind of interesting. I think it's a little bit rubbish, to be honest. The Control R on both of these Pokemon. The Porygon 2 for 3 Colorless Energy does 20x the amount of supporters in your discard pile with Rocket in its name, and then it's the same attack on the Porygon Z, but for just 2 energy or 1 attachment of the Rocket's energy. The reconstitute ability is kind of interesting on this Pokemon, where you discard 2 in order to draw 1. That's really bad, right? But it does allow you to throw your Rocket supporters away. So you can max out at 20 Rocket supporters if you play 4 copies of each of these. The idea being that you can use them as and when you need to, but also reconstitute all these excess ones as you go. It's a strange situation where I think you actually need to play more than 20 supporter cards in your deck. You probably need to play Research as well, because you really want to just pitch these the whole time. As soon as you see them, you want to pitch them. Maybe the factory helps out here, where you can draw even more cards, but I think you need a real sustainable engine behind this, like lots more ability Pokemon, maybe even like Zoroark EXs behind this to really push it. But I do think the fact that it's a stage 2 and the stage 1 is too expensive to attack with unless you play like those reversal energies, and again that comes with this whole heap of other issues. So I'm not impressed. I think the deck composition is going to be really weird. Your reliance on special energy is weird. Having to play Candy probably, even if it's in low counts, is weird in a list that doesn't really have easy ways to find it unless you're using like Petrol for it. Yeah, the discard 2, draw 1. They made it this bad because if they made it a better ability, it could go into like every Rockets deck and solve the issue that Rockets has, which was draw power. So they had to make this ability so bad that it only worked for its own attack. That's why they did it. Also love the artwork of this Taylor. There you go. I think at the moment, the Rockets Mewtwo flatters to deceive. I do think it's going to be really good into Dragapult. I just don't know how good it's going to be into the field, which is important. Like the high damage output 1-hit KO decks of like Golden Go and Bolt are really terrifying me, because I think you won't have much of a leg to stand on. But then there's going to be decks that can't KO you and suddenly Wobbuffet's making a meme of them, or the fact that you are blocking basically everything that Pult wants to do and copying them back is just insane. So it's at least going to be a counter-style archetype. Who knows yet how consistent it can be. I do need to test more with it still, with those factories in higher counts than what I've tested. I do think the Watchtower's busted, and what else? The Crobat is interesting. I think it's, again, quite slow. I don't know if Arbok's going to be just, like, all-encompassing so good that we're going to play it in a few different decks of, like, the best hit and runs that we have in the format, or whatnot. And so Titan, yeah, I still need to build around this card more. This card is so powerful. Such a unique ability. Oh, and Loki, buy your Blazerkins now while they're cheap, because we've got a plus 10 hit point buff. And I genuinely think that's one of the big reasons holding it back right now. Let me know your thoughts on Glory to Team Rocket. I am really enjoying doing lots of IRL testing. I've literally got, 7 decks with me right now that are all already in Destined Rivals. Myself and Jack are already doing some tabletop testing. So we're going to be right on the pulse this time around before NAIC. Before we can start playing these cards, because we were late to the party last time for Journey Together. And this time we're going to be right at the forefront. So hope you enjoy that, and hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.